Hello there, my name is Mike Lysakowski of Motorsport Aspects, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation titled Know Your Audience, Marketing to the Thick Slice. This presentation is aimed at Speedway promoters, owners, marketing, and advertising personnel, and this material was presented at the RPM Promoters Workshops in years gone by. I've been asked to upload this presentation to YouTube, so I hope that you enjoy it and take some critical information from it, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Know Your Audience is all about advertising and marketing in auto racing. And when we say the thick slice, this graph that is shown on the screen represents actual data collected by university marketing students during an entire racing season at a central Pennsylvania dirt track oval years ago. The blue represents the population of 3 counties surrounding the racetrack, and the green represents the actual number of people who attended one or more races at the Speedway that year. So when we refer to the thick slice, we're speaking of all of those people in the communities around your Speedway that have never attended a race or never sampled the product of short track racing. And to be perfectly honest, that's the group that we should be targeting in most of our advertising and marketing endeavors. As I mentioned, my name is Mike, and since age 17, I've worked in the short track auto racing industry. I've been a broadcaster, I've been an announcer, public relations and marketing consultant. My company prints programs and souvenir yearbooks for touring series and for speedways as well. So with so many years in the industry, I have a perspective that comes from being a fan to a racing professional. I've never been a driver, a car owner. My family had never been involved in motorsports before they were taking me to the races as a 2-year-old who fell in love with the sport. So after graduating from the Westminster College in Western Pennsylvania, I've made my living. Actually, before that time, I started a small business that catered to the racing industry in high school. And once I left college with a public relations degree, I started to be a consultant for speedways around the country, and I'm going to share some of the experiences with you. And most importantly, I'm going to point out a lot of mistakes that I see made in the marketing of speedways across the country. Now, keeping in mind that some of you out there may see a familiar web page, as I've taken some examples and covered up the names and phone numbers and websites to protect the guilty in this case, we will be using real-life screen captures and real-life advertising materials when I point out some of the mistakes that I see commonly made by promoters. Now, the important part of this presentation is this. At no point am I suggesting that you spend more money advertising and marketing your speedway. At no point do I suggest doing more. I just want you to do it better. Whatever you're spending in time, effort to advertise digitally, to advertise in the traditional media, I just want you to go through a new thought process and stop wasting marketing dollars by advertising to the wrong audience. We have some really good news in the industry of short track auto racing. Consumer desires are leaning toward doing things rather than buying things with their disposable income. And this trend has been documented by advertising and marketing journals, and it's true across several generations right now that people are much more interested in doing than owning. And that is certainly great news to those of us in an entertainment industry like auto racing. Here's a specific quote from the advertising age. All consumers, not just millennials, want experiences, not things. Experiences are also what people increasingly use to define themselves across social channels. In other words, not only do they want to experience things rather than own things, they're very interested in bragging about these experiences, which can be very, very good news because in a way that is advertising for you by the old traditional method of word of mouth converted to the digital age. And we'll talk about that in greater detail in just a few minutes. So consumers, as we've mentioned a few times already in this presentation, are going to be defined as the thick slice of this graph that was actually compiled by marketing students years ago. So the defining term of consumer, general public people who are not at all familiar with racing, aka the thick slice of this population graph, by far the most people. The thin slice, that tiny little segment that we all belong to, are die-hard race fans. That thin green slice of the pie are the repeat customers and die-hard enthusiasts that comprise that little tiny slice of the population of 3 counties. And when I say that this includes us, one of the biggest mistakes that's made throughout all channels of marketing and advertising in the racing industry is speaking to the race fans. And that's very easy for us to do because we live in the thin slice. And so it makes a lot of sense for us to use terminology and images that only appeal to others in the thin slice. And the entire point of this presentation is to reach out to all the people who have never experienced our fantastic product of short track racing. So now we know who consumers are. They are the thick slice, and we know that we, the race fans, are the thin slice of the population graph. Now, the perspective from which this presentation comes from, this does not apply to special events. This does not apply to high-ticket, high-purse events that are the crown jewel of your schedule. The principles outlined in this presentation are for a weekly racing event with a very affordable ticket price, and all of these principles apply to the mass media marketing. And I mean not the trade publications, not the racing magazines. We're talking about advertising to the general public in television commercials, radio commercials, newspaper ads in the town newspaper, not in the racing journals. We're talking about marketing digitally to the population of that thick slice of the pie. All of the things that we're discussing here are for advertising opportunities outside of the racing industry and not for special events. And the simple reason I say that this applies to a weekly event is because we're going to discuss how to bring people in for the very first time, people unfamiliar with short track racing. And in my experience, it is much, much easier to convince someone to try out a new product by giving 3 hours of their weekend and $12 admission, as opposed to a big special event asking someone who's never even sampled short track racing to give you 2 full days of a weekend and a $60 admission price. I think that's much less likely. So we're going to look at this from the standpoint of weekly racing and from the standpoint of mass media advertising and marketing. Now, when I mentioned that we live in the thin slice, there are 2 factors here that lead racetrack promoters to make lots of mistakes in marketing and advertising. Fact number 1, it is very easy for us to communicate to those who are like ourselves, and that's true in every aspect of life. For us, it requires more thought to remove our industry terms and the language that we are accustomed to using every day in the racing industry. That process is what you need to go through and proofread all of your advertising, your radio scripts, your television scripts, your printed flyers, and everything that you do digitally. Since it's so easy to communicate to people like us, we need to slow down and maybe even use someone who has never been to a race before as a proofreader for us. Send an email with a flyer that you print to someone who's never been to a race and say, do you understand all the language that we're using here? Does this flyer reach out to you and make you want to try our product? It is so easy for us to communicate with our racing terms that can be a kiss of death to marketing and advertising out to the general public. Now, the second fact that's even more frustrating about those of us who live in the racing industry in the thin slice is that seeing race cars no longer has any impact on us because we see them so often. And what I try to get promoters to do is think back to that time when you were just a youngster, when the sight of a race car on an open trailer or a race car sitting at a business in town attracted your eye, got your attention. It was colorful. It was unique. It was an experience just to see the car. Sadly, because we are exposed to race cars all the time, we've become completely desensitized to looking at these amazing and exotic machines because we're around them so frequently. And I have a great way of trying to get us out of that habit, which I used in the room full of hundreds of promoters at the RPM workshop when this material was delivered the first time. And that's this phrase, and it's a key phrase. Race cars are exciting. We forget this because of our hours and hours and hours each week spent inside the racing industry. But to people who are not familiar with going to the races, these cars are something to look at even when sitting still. So in the room of hundreds of promoters, I made the audience out loud chant this phrase over and over again, and each time the slide pops up in this presentation, I want you to say it out loud as you're watching. Race cars are exciting. We forget that because we're so submerged in this industry. But just think back and watch a small child, watch an 8, 9, 10-year-old child when they walk up to a race car sitting at the mall show or in a restaurant parking lot or at a car dealership. We forget how those used to impact us when we were just children, how exciting it was to see a race car even sitting still. And we need to think of that when we're doing our advertising and marketing, and I'll explain that in greater detail. So say it along with me, race cars are exciting. Most speedways are failing to reach or have an impact on the thick slice through their marketing endeavors. And the two key reasons for that, language and images. These are the two main points of all the material that we're going to discuss. Language is key, and images can sell. All advertising should be directed to the general public, aka the thick slice, in language they understand, with images that sell our product. You want to keep that language and those images consistent through your communication in all marketing endeavors. That means the same terms that you use in the radio commercial should be the same language used on the television commercial, should be the same language used on all digital endeavors, including your website and social media. That language needs to remain the same, those images need to remain the same in order to reach these thick slice consumers. And we're going to talk again in great detail about that, but keep this point in mind in that the communication should be the same through all channels. In other words, your website needs to have the same impact on people who've never been exposed to short track racing as a TV commercial would. And we'll go into greater detail coming up in just a few moments. Communication and word choice in all forms of advertising need to be targeted to the general public. And I have an example here for you. How do you communicate differently when you're at the Thanksgiving table with relatives of all ages and genders versus the way you communicate when you're on the golf course with your buddies? And here's what I mean by that. Let's say you're in the golf course locker room and you have a great story. You can begin that story to your friends and golfers in that locker room and start out by saying, so I'm in the tee box at number 3 at Oakmont. And the story can begin that way. Versus the Thanksgiving dinner table where maybe you want to tell that same story, but you have to include details. There's a golf course in western Pennsylvania where the U.S. Open is routinely held. And the third hole there has a dog leg where you can't see the hole from where you tee off. So as I'm getting ready to hit the ball for the first time, does this example resonate with you? Maybe you have a story that people are often asking you to tell at the holidays or around the bonfire every summer. And you know that depending on the audience, you have to change up some of the language in that story because some of the people there may not have all of the knowledge that they need to enjoy that story. So just like my golfing example, details and different language are needed. So every time you run an advertisement for your racetrack, read the room, as the catchphrase goes. Evaluate who your audience is and what type of details you need to include because not everyone is going to understand our racing jargon. So use this example and evaluate how you communicate. The audience of thick slice general consumers are not going to understand the terms that we use every day when we're dealing with our friends and coworkers in the racing industry. Never advertise money or purse to consumers. And there's a few dangers in doing this. One of those dangers is that the general consumers who are more accustomed to watching ESPN than attending short track races are probably going to find our purse numbers to be rather minuscule, even if we're bragging about a high purse event, because all they hear are the NBA player contracts and the NHL and Major League Baseball contracts of $30, $40, $60 million per year. And if that's the general consumer's idea of sports salaries and payouts, our $5,000 to win races are going to sound quite piddly to them. But more important than what the number means is the fact that that information isn't important to the people coming through your gates for a regular weekly racing show. No one needs to know the purse in order to enjoy the race. Now, with hundreds of promoters in the room for the RPM workshop, I posed a question to some of the greatest minds in all of racing. At the front of the room from the podium, I asked a room full of racing professionals, what was the purse paid at the Indianapolis 500 this past year? And in a room of hundreds and hundreds of the greatest minds in racing, only a few hands were raised. So let's think about that. Over 250,000 fans bought a ticket to attend the Indianapolis 500. How many of them knew or cared what the amount of purse was? If those of us in the racing industry have a hard time naming the purse, certainly all of those fans would have a difficult time identifying exactly what was paid out. Yet that race sold more tickets than any of our short track events did last year. Now, keeping in mind that we're talking about advertising to the mass media here, obviously, to place an ad in Area Auto Racing News or Late Model Digest, you want the purse numbers to be in there. But I have a great personal story here about why you should never advertise the purse. And again, it's not important to those people, but take a listen to what happened as you see a photo there of my friend Heather and her son Matthew. Heather is exactly the person that we should be targeting in the short track racing industry. Heather is a single mom, and Heather has 3 single mom friends who spend every Thursday and Friday discussing what they're going to do to entertain their families all weekend. And most every Saturday or Sunday or even Friday night, all 3 moms and their total of, I believe, 6 children, they pick an activity. They go to a water park. They go to a play. They go to a county fair. So this is exactly the person that we need to be targeting in our advertising endeavors. Now, because Heather is a close friend of mine, she had already been to one race a couple of years prior to the story that I'm about to tell you, and she probably has a little bit more knowledge about the sport just because we're such close friends, even though she's attended only one race. So I'm driving Heather home from a friend's birthday party one evening, and I said, I'm really excited to leave for my road trip this weekend because I have a really big race on Saturday that I'm pretty excited to broadcast. And Heather said to me, well, why is this race any different for you to announce than other ones? And I said, well, when I say a big race, this race pays $15,000 to win. And Heather turned to me and said, is that a lot? Now, since I'm a communicator for a living, I thought I had the right comeback to this. And I said to Heather, well, Heather, when you go to work tomorrow, do you have the chance to make $15,000 for one day's work? And Heather's answer really surprised me and virtually made me speechless. After my great response of, are you going to make $15,000 at work tomorrow? Heather said, well, no, I'm not, but I don't have to buy a really expensive piece of equipment, pay people to help me work on it, truck it across the country, and risk damaging it for that paycheck. So is that a lot of money? And when she was so astute to pose that question to me, it instantly made me realize that the thick slice general consumers have no care or desire to know what we are paying the racers, and they have no concept if we were to advertise that number, whether it's a big deal or not. So that would be a wasted language, wasted seconds in a radio commercial, wasted seconds in a television commercial, wasted space in a newspaper ad to tell general consumers like Heather and her single mom friends looking for entertainment how much our races pay. Now, here's a prime example. This flyer will come back up a little bit later in the presentation, but I wanted to show it for just a moment right now. My printing company printed this flyer for a speedway. They asked me to bring 2,800 copies of this flyer to the racetrack, which I did. So for 2,800 people to take a look at this flyer, the point they're making is now $2,000 to win. And that information, because they got 34 cars to attend the Enduro, my guess is that the $2,000 to win was important to about 70 people. 34 drivers and 34 car owners or girlfriends or wives or brothers or sisters or crew chiefs. So you had about 2 people per team that cared what the race paid to win. So in order to communicate to about 70 people that the race paid $2,000 to win, they handed out 2,800 flyers to people who really don't care what the paycheck is, but probably don't understand what an enduro race is. So instead of explaining the concept of the enduro race, showing photos of what can happen during an enduro, They advertise the purse and entry fee. So I ask you, to how many of those 2,800 people was that information even important? So, in your advertising to the general population, the consumers of the thick slice, never use purse money and never use our industry jargon. These terms will confuse potential customers and perhaps scare them into thinking that they don't possess enough knowledge to even enjoy or understand our racing. Never use terms like B main, A main, consi, hot laps, pill draw, redraw. All of these things are going to mean nothing or confuse the general population. And if they can't understand the advertising message, they're going to believe that they have no hope of understanding what will actually take place on the racetrack. So use terms about the entertainment value, not the technical details that only the competitors are going to find important. Avoid division names in advertising to the general population. This is going to come back up a little bit later because I had a very intelligent question posed to me after one of the RPM workshop seminars, and it was regarding this point. So I'll make the point now, and at the end of the presentation, we'll come back to that question. Try to avoid division names. 410 sprints, 358 modifieds, 305. These numbers mean nothing to consumers today. Keep in mind, all of our cars have liter engines now and not cubic inches. And when you throw in numbers like that, people might think it's 410 laps, 305 laps, 305 horsepower. They have no concept of what these numbers mean. But more importantly, kids, families, and casual fans will have no idea how to associate even our more common division names with what the race cars look like. The term late model is used more often in used car advertising than it is in short track racing advertising. So to explain to people in a radio commercial or on a flyer that modifieds, late models, and 410 sprints will be participating in a race probably conjures up no mental image whatsoever. Instead, say things like 5 division racing or 5 different types of cars compete each Saturday night, and avoid the industry jargon that only the thin slice people will understand in your advertising. One of my biggest pet peeves is the naming of memorial races. It didn't occur to me until 7 or 8 years ago when I attended a baseball game at my home ballpark of PNC Park in Pittsburgh, and I just happened to arrive on Roberto Clemente Day. Now, Roberto Clemente Day is celebrated all over Major League Baseball on that particular day of the year, and I just happened to be in the city of Pittsburgh where Clemente played his Major League Baseball. And it occurred to me at that moment that we weren't watching the game called the Roberto Clemente Memorial, and nowhere in Major League Baseball was it the Roberto Clemente Memorial, because memorial is a depressing word that indicates a sad event that in general people are not going to want to attend for weekend amusement. So instead, try naming your memorial races the Rich Vogler Classic, Rich Vogler Day, Rich Vogler Night, the Rich Vogler Tribute. Try these words instead of memorial. And I like to use this example. Let's just say that a father is headed home from work on a Friday night and he's listening to the radio, and a commercial for your Speedway comes on announcing the memorial event coming up at your track on Saturday. Obviously, he's not going to know the name of the driver that it was named after, but when he hears the word memorial, just imagine that he runs home to his family and says, "Kids, gather around. I got a great idea on the way home from work today. Everybody grab a hoodie because Daddy's taking you to a memorial." That is not a word that indicates fun and entertainment. We can still honor the drivers and significant folks to the racing community that we've lost, but let's kick out the word memorial. Let's make it a classic. Let's make it a day, a night, or a tribute, and leave the depressing words out. Now, one of the most important points that we're going to make throughout the rest of this information is trying to drive home the point that websites and social media are advertising. They are not a means of communicating with the people closest to us, like competitors, like car owners, like the diehard fans that attend every single week. Websites and social media will be a complete waste of resources, being both time and money, if they are used for anything other than advertising. So let's jump right into some internet information here. First of all, coming from the Statistic Brain Research Institute, take a look at these statistics. 17% of people will abandon your page in less than 4 seconds. The percent of page views that lasted more than 10 minutes is only 4% and continuing to fall. The percent of words read on your web page with 111 words or less, 49%. Think about that. Only 49% of the words that you're putting on the screen are going to be read. And the reason it says 111 or less is because this is not a content of like a book or a report. These are your standard websites with advertising messages that are less than 100 words, and only 49% of those words are read. Why? Because people are abandoning them and leaving the site before they can finish. Only 4.4 seconds are spent for each additional 100 words. So they're glazing over your website in an effort to get what they want very quickly and then moving on. Now, this is staggering. Time visiting the page. The first 10 seconds of a visit to your web page are the most critical. As you take a look at this information, I found so many different studies as I was researching this information. And you see that the summary there at the bottom is to communicate your value proposition within 10 seconds. I decided to I searched probably 15 or 20 different marketing research sites. And when it was all said and done, I came up with a couple of staggering statistics, which I arrived at by average. 32% of consumers will abandon your website between 1 and 5 seconds. And here's the big one. After averaging reports from about a dozen different sites, web viewers' attention span is approximately 45 seconds. So let's compare that to our radio and TV commercials, which we know are probably 30 seconds, in some cases maybe 60 seconds. You've got relatively the same length of time to make an impression on a first-time website visitor as you would in any other form of traditional advertising or media. So let's file that 45 seconds away in our brains, and let's keep in mind that you need to make an impression in the first 10 seconds to even achieve that 45-second number with most consumers, and we'll move on to this statement. The website is advertising. I said it once, and I'm going to say it again. It's not internal communication for your website. It's not internal communication for your employees. It's not internal communication. When I say internal, I'm talking about the people that live within our thin slice. The internal people in that thin slice are competitors, mechanics, and die-hard race fans who come out every week. Now, I have invented the Keystone Speedway for the purposes of this demonstration, and I want you to take a look at the material that you're going to see here for a 30-second television commercial. And I want you to let me know if you think this would make a terrific TV commercial. Just take a look at this footage. Is this what you would want to show in 30-second snippets to a world full of people who have never been to your racetrack? Victory lane images, maybe an interview, people posing for photos, a driver climbing out of the car, a photographer. Are these the types of images from Victory Lane that you would showcase in a 30-second television commercial? Ah, there we go. Guy in a fire suit standing still, a car sitting still. Would any of these images make a great television commercial? My hunch is no. All of the images that you just saw would make a terrible 30-second television commercial. Because race cars are exciting. That's right, say it with me. Your website homepage has to have the same effect as a television commercial. People are only going to stay for 10 to 45 seconds, and you need to win them over by selling the product of short track racing. These are the kinds of images that your website and your social media need to contain. Why do we see so many victory lane photos on the home page of a website and on a Facebook page when you know you wouldn't use the victory lane images and footage for a TV commercial? Why are you using it on the website and Facebook page? It doesn't sell the product of short track racing. No longer is the first impression of your speedway the driveway or the sign or the entrance. The first impression of your speedway now occurs when a consumer types your website or clicks on a link or visits your social media. No longer is that driveway the first impression. The first impression is that 10 to 45 seconds that we're speaking of when they discover you digitally. So use the images that will sell your product. Hide the results from the home page. Hide the point standings. Hide the victory lane photos, because the only people looking for that content are the people who are willing to spend 2, 3, 10, 15 minutes on your site because they're already hooked on our product. They go to your website routinely looking for these things, so it won't hurt to make them click on a tab off to the side somewhere to find these things. The danger in putting points, news, results, and victory lane photos in where people are going to see the first 10 to 45 seconds of their visit is that you're failing to sell them and they're going to abandon your website. Now let's take a look at some examples, and I hope I don't offend anyone out there. If you see something from a track that you know, I'm just pointing out that these are some mistakes and some things that could be improved to better market the product of short track racing to the thick slice of general consumers. Now take a look at this as a page that is a landing point or a home page for the Speedway. Does anything on this page make you want to check out and sample the product of short track racing? Do you see anything that indicates excitement? This is the home page. This is the first place that a new fan could land. And nothing here sells them on the concept of coming out to see what it is that short track racing is all about. This is all news and point standings that only the diehard race fans want. So make them click 2 or 3 more times and bury this on the site somewhere, because they won't mind. They intend to spend minutes at your site, as opposed to the people who are going to be driven away by these images because there's nothing to motivate them to stay another 35 seconds on this website. How about adding some photos like this? Do you think that would help? I certainly do. Race cars are exciting. Use them as a marketing tool. Race cars are what we have to sell the product. They're the best thing about going to the race. The best thing about going to the race is not tracking the point standings. The best thing about going to the race is seeing these colorful, exciting, powerful-looking cars. Showcase them digitally, just like you would in a TV commercial. Here's another example. Now take a look at the content on this home page. Again, this is the first page where someone would land when trying to find information about a speedway. This is your new first impression in the digital era. All of the messages here are only aimed at competitors. So not only are we failing to market the product that we have and failing to show these exciting race cars, but again, like the Enduro Flyer, to how many people is this information important? You've got the super stocks, the late models, and the driver safety update on the home page of the website. So let's say that maybe on a regular night they have 140 cars in the pits. This information is important to 140 to 300 people. The problem is there could be 25 to 30,000 people in the surrounding counties, aka the thick slice population, who've never been to the racetrack, who get their first impression of this. They may even question whether spectators are welcome, since the only message hitting them in the first 10 to 45 seconds is all about the competitors. This is what I mean by digital marketing endeavors being used as communication instead of advertising. This is a waste of resources, because 20 to 30,000 people could be sold on the concept of coming to this racetrack on Saturday. Instead, it's being used to communicate to 150 people who we probably have other means of reaching by email or by group text or by any number of methods of communication. Websites as a communication are a waste of time and money. This doesn't resemble any of the messages, language, or images that we would throw at people in a television commercial. The chances of people finding your website in the digital era are actually greater than finding a television commercial. So why is this first impression used to communicate to people that are closest to us? Waste of resources. Try adding these images instead. Let's win people over with the homepage of the website and force those who need rules bulletins to spend another 2 or 3 minutes clicking to find those items because they're going to be willing to do it. Race cars are exciting. Believe it, preach it, say it with me, and remember how we felt about seeing race cars before we were desensitized to it by being submerged in the sport constantly. Now, here's a real-life example of how photos sold me. My girlfriend is a wine lover, and I don't mind a glass of wine from time to time, but a friend of mine was telling me about a big wine festival happening about an hour and a half from my house. So after I took that information home in my brain, before I wanted to suggest it to my girlfriend, knowing that she would want to go, I decided to check it out online to decide if I was going to keep this information a secret. When I got to their webpage, I found these 3 images. And as soon as I saw these 3 images, I immediately called my girlfriend and said, hey, let's go to a wine festival this weekend. I spent $35 per person, drove an hour and a half each way to attend a wine festival. Now, I ask you this. If the images and language on the home page of the wine festival would have been describing the types of wine in terminology that I don't understand and showed the standard picture of the wine glass on a barrel with a bunch of grapes beside it, I would have not been motivated to spend $70 and drive an hour and a half. But these images spoke to me when I landed on the homepage in that first 10 to 45 seconds. Hey, I love live music. Turns out there's 3 bands performing that day. Hey, I love food. Turns out there were exotic food trucks from all over the state in attendance at that wine festival. Hey, I like pretty girls. Turns out the scenery besides my girlfriend won't be that shabby to be submerged in for the day. So these 3 images sold me on something that I'm not terribly interested in and was just trying to maybe dip my toe in to sample. Turns out now I go every year because I enjoyed the event so much. So ask yourself this question. Your web page, your Facebook page, are there images there that will take someone who's on the fence and not really understanding what we do and convince them to make the commute and lay out the money for the ticket? The wine festival won me over, so let's think about that example when we evaluate our short track racing advertising endeavors. Keeping in mind again that websites and social media are advertising, not to be used as communication. And one more time, we're going to say it, race cars are exciting. When I say to lose the victory lane photos, this is another case of the diehard fans being willing to find them when they're buried on the website. The first time I ever told a promoter to take the victory lane photos off the homepage and off the Facebook page and put them in an album somewhere else where people will have to click a few times to find them. That promoter listened to me, and within about 9 days, he gave me a call, and he said, you told me to hide all the victory lane pictures. Well, guess what? I keep getting all these calls and emails. Where's the victory lane pictures at? He said, I just now got a call from a woman. She called me on the phone and bothered me because she wants to find the victory lane pictures. I said, okay, Mr. Promoter, I want you to tell me right now exactly the words she used in the phone call when she asked you about the pictures. And he said, well, I just told you. She called and said, where are the victory lane photos? And I said, then consider this. If she knows the terminology of victory lane photos, if she visits your website frequently enough to know that you've moved them, you've already won her over. This is a person who would be coming to your racetrack if you didn't have a Facebook page. This would be a person coming to your racetrack and buying a ticket if there were no internet in existence or if your website went down. Those are not the people we need to reach through advertising. So she has to spend an extra 45 seconds going to a new tab on the website to find the victory lane photos. That is well worth it in order to win over the tens of thousands of people who are not going to be sold by the images you see on the screen right now. We've got to think about this product. You wouldn't put these images in a TV commercial, as we just watched 30 seconds of victory lane images, and you agreed that that would be a horrible television commercial. If they wouldn't make a good TV commercial, these images shouldn't be on your Facebook page and shouldn't be the first things that pop up on your website. Now let's take a look at this one, for example. The Bob Azerowitz fans and the Mitch Dowd fans were probably thrilled to visit this home page of a Speedway website the week after they won. The problem is all of Bob's and Mitch's fans already know where to be on Saturday to watch Bob and Mitch. If they know to come and look for the victory lane photos, you've already got them. We need to be advertising to the thick slice because there's tens and hundreds of thousands more of those people than there are in our thin slice who want to see these photos. Now, I ask you this. Is our product selling people tickets to hold a piece of black and white silk? Or is our product selling tickets to watch exciting cars bumping into each other and obtaining high speeds? We need to show the race cars that are exciting. Here's a website that is beautifully designed for us thin slice race fans. All the recent results are there. The victory lane is there. This is an easy to navigate, fantastic website for those of us who live in the thin slice. But again, it doesn't show what you're going to see for a person who's never experienced the product before. We're not selling people a chance to get their photo taken in front of a car holding a flag. We're selling the opportunity for people to watch a thrilling sport. And no thrills are depicted on this website, even as well designed as it is. This next statement summarizes the reason that you shouldn't use victory lane photos. And it pains me to say this way, because when I say this, I know that I'm speaking of my childhood heroes. I'm speaking of the people that meant the most to me growing up. I'm speaking about the people whose posters were and still are on the walls of my office and my bedroom when I was a kid. The reality of it is, a photo of a middle-aged man in a grease-stained unitard does not motivate anyone to want to drive to the racetrack, buy a ticket, or even spend more time searching for better information on your website. These are not pictures that sell. Think about when you were a kid. If there was a race car sitting at a restaurant, didn't you want to pull in and go check it out? What if a guy in unitard pajamas holding a flag was standing in that restaurant parking lot? Would it make people want to pull over and stop and check it out? I don't think so. These photos don't have the life-changing impact that race cars had on all of us that made us want to get into this industry when we were young. So I ask you, which of these images sells our product? Before you choose any picture for your website or your social media, a printed brochure, a flyer, a billboard, any form of advertising, digital or traditional, ask yourself this question. Do young families want to buy a ticket to see colorful, roaring cars at top speed or sweaty drivers holding a piece of black and white silk? These are critical decisions to make in all forms of our advertising. Because remember, race cars are exciting, and showing them in every form of advertising doesn't cost you any more money. This isn't about spending more money and doing more. This is about the thought process to make what you're already doing more effective. Point standings, results, victory lane photos. Hide them. Give them separate tabs on your website. Your Thin Slice Weekly fans will find it all. They won't abandon your site in 10 to 45 seconds like all the first-time visitors will. These things don't sell your product, and we need to be selling in 10 to 45 seconds. Here's another example. This racetrack seems awfully proud of their wooden planks and wire fence. Where's the allure here? What prompts a consumer to look at this page in 10 to 45 seconds and say, oh, I got to see that? Here's the sad part. Take a look at that little counter in the upper right under the photo. It says that 90,895 visitors left this website with these images as their first impression of short track racing. It's not enough to leave an impression whatsoever. Here's another example. This is a home page of a website. As soon as a potential consumer typed .com, this is what popped up on their screen. Last week's results. They don't know the names of these individuals. A black and white photo. Keep in mind, color only costs more when you're printing. In the website and digital mediums, using color doesn't really cost you any more. There's no race car. The results tab of the site could show this information to the people who are seeking the information. Why don't we use this homepage to win over some potential consumers? Take a look at these pages. Oh, congratulations, Natural Bridge Speedway. Look at that. 3 colorful late models almost touching each other, and the information about a rescheduling. That's what people need to see in 10 to 45 seconds. Congratulations, Lawrenceburg Speedway. How many cars can you fit in one photo? Look at that. That's the kind of excitement we sell tickets for. Now, keeping in mind that there are important locations for these principles. The home page, obviously where people are going to land for their first impression. The About Us page, that's a page that's always clicked by new consumers. The people who are weekly fans, they don't need to click the About Us page because they already know about us. The Contact and Directions page. The Contact and Directions page is going to be visited most frequently by people who have never been to the racetrack. The Schedule page. That's where people need to go to see when you're racing. All of these locations on your website, and of course all channels of your social media, must sell racing with images that are exciting and language that anyone can understand. Let's take a look at another example. Here's a schedule page. Everything on here tells me that regular things are happening. These events are so ordinary that apparently nobody's ever even taken a photo of what goes on there. Think about when I say race cars are exciting. No other form of a business has an employed photographer on site every time they're open. If you own a jewelry store or a concrete plant, you don't take pictures every single time that you're open. We prioritize having someone on site to gather photos of the excitement that takes place every time we're open for business. Now let's take those images and use them for what they're for, selling our product. Congratulations, Columbus Motor Speedway. This is the way the schedule page should look. They've nailed it. Nothing on here is regular. It lists for me all the things that will be competing. It shows me photos to define those things so that when a division name is used, geez, I don't know what an ARCA truck is because I'm a general consumer who's never been to a race before. But right there across from the date is a picture of an ARCA truck. I understand what that is now thanks to the visual aid. This is eye-pleasing color and excitement. This is the way a schedule page needs to look. As opposed to this. You'll notice that this schedule communicates more things that are excluded than things that are included. Every line at the start of the schedule tells me what's not going to be there. How could a general public consumer have any concept of what they're going to be watching after reading information that's communicated in this way? Now, with a room full of racing professionals staring at me at the RPM workshop, I used a little bit of theatrics here, and I said, well, since so many of you in the room have known me throughout the years, I thought while I have your attention on the big screen here that I would show you some pictures of the new house that I just finished building, because I know a couple of you asked if I've moved in and finished the house. So let's take a look here and use some of our time together at this workshop to see pictures of my house from a drone. As I looked around the room, hundreds of people said, why are you going to waste my time showing photos of your house from a drone? Well, I want to ask all of you, why does anyone want to see your property from a drone photo? If you don't want to see pictures of my property from the air, most consumers don't want to see pictures of your property from the air. When I see this on a printed brochure, when I see this on a flyer, when I see this on a homepage, my immediate question is this. Are you trying to attract real estate agents, or are you trying to attract entertainment-starved families and sports fans? Because what I see here is acreage, and acreage is not exciting. The only people who want to see your property from a drone are the people who are already coming every week. The guy who parks his rig in turn 4 wants to see your track from a drone and go, hey, look, there's my pickup truck down there. I can see that. Only the people who are already most invested in short track racing want to see this property photo. Take a look at your amusement park websites. Take a look at your professional sports team websites. Do the NHL teams show their arena from a blimp? No. Does the amusement park show you a drone photo of the entire park? Well, sure, on the map tab, sure. But when you land for that 10 to 45 seconds on the homepage, the amusement park is showing the rides, the happiness, the excitement. The hockey team is showing the hockey excitement. We're not in the business of showing acreage. We're in the business of showing thrilling sports action. Nobody wants to see the property until you're trying to sell it. Leave the drone photo to hang in the concession stand when people are already on your property. Leave the drone photo for the time that you're going to advertise the racetrack for sale. Nothing about your property is going to sell. Let's say you're a family and you're looking for something to do Saturday night. Here are 4 photos of an empty facility. What does this do to demonstrate what will actually be taking place when you drive to the property to buy your ticket? And this, of course, includes the social media. You don't want that drone photo as the lead on your social media. Let's dive into social media in a little bit greater detail here. Because just like the website that we've been talking about, Facebook and social media are advertising. I know this is about the 4th time that I've said it, but I'm going to show you some mistakes used in social media where, again, we're using it to communicate to those closest to us instead of advertising to the masses. Now, we all know that the best form of advertising is what? Say it with me, word of mouth advertising. We all know the answer to that. Well, when I'm sitting at racetracks and I hear the announcer say, like us on Facebook, you need to like us on Facebook, sign up for our Twitter, like us. The like is the digital equivalent of someone grabbing your brochure from a rack or taking your business card. There's nothing wrong with it. It has a positive effect. Obviously, taking your brochure is helpful, and that's the digital equivalent of a Facebook like. What we need to do is encourage them to check in on Facebook. The check-in on Facebook is the modern equivalent of water cooler talk because it's a testimonial. This is a first-hand testimonial that someone actually went to your speedway. This is the new word-of-mouth advertising adapted to digital form. This will motivate more and more people to visit you on Facebook, where hopefully they see photos of exciting race cars. But you've got to understand that the check-in is so much more valuable than the like. Create contests, give away a free t-shirt, give away a free ticket from all those who check in. The difference here being that I've liked several things in social media that I've never actually attended or been to. But when I've checked into a place, now that tells all of my friends and family members that I've given my Saturday night to actually check this out. And it's going to spark conversation, which then becomes the word-of-mouth advertising. Make sure that those check-ins are happening and figure out a creative way to do it. The benefits are immense. Now, here's a real-life story revolving around a check-in on social media. My girlfriend and I went to an Italian restaurant that's been in the same location for 40, 50 years. They are always very busy, and as we reached the desk to put in for a table, we were told it would be about a 15 or 20-minute wait. So we sat down on a bench in the foyer, and my girlfriend pulled out her mobile device, and she checked us into this particular restaurant. Now, it wasn't 12 to 15 to 20 minutes. They actually got us our seat in probably 6 or 7 minutes. So we got up from our little bench, we made our way to our table and sat down, and just in that length of time walking across the restaurant, of my girlfriend's 383 friends, 7 of them posted relevant questions or comments regarding her check-in to the restaurant. It was things like, oh, is that place still open? Or where is that located? Or I was there when I was a kid. I forgot all about that place. These are examples of my girlfriend putting out there a testimonial that we are actually at the restaurant. And then if she wants to engage and say, hey, it's located just off of the main strip of Route 8, or if she wants to say, yeah, I was here when I was a little kid, now you've got real conversation happening as a result of a check-in that is never a result of a like on Facebook. Now, keeping in mind that the Facebook page is for others to do the marketing for you. And again, that results in the best kind, word of mouth. And knowing how valuable word of mouth advertising is, I invite you to create a selfie zone at your speedway. Here we see the Irons Mill Farmstead. I'm not sure exactly where that's located, but you see that they've encouraged people to post on social media. Maybe this woman and her son weren't motivated to pull up the page and check in. But now that she has this photo, people are going to say, hey, where was that? Oh, it says the Iron Mill Farmstead. This is another way of giving a testimonial that you've actually been there. Twitter, Instagram, all the social media sites are so helpful in this way that you need to create a selfie zone at your racetrack where people are going to do the advertising for you. Here's a photo of me standing between Betty Boop and apparently a giant hot dog. Here's a photo of a very well-maintained horse. And as I'm posing for that photo, I'm thinking to myself, these businesses must spend a lot of time and effort cleaning, painting, and maintaining these structures outside. Well, why would they go through all that expense and maintenance? Because the social media benefits are through the roof. This creates that word-of-mouth advertising by people putting themselves into a situation in your business that just begs to be posted on social media. We'll go back to a slide that we started the presentation with. All consumers, not just millennials, want experiences. And that when they want to brag about them on social media, you need to provide a great opportunity. We're going to create selfie zones at speedways all across America because this is the rage. And we've absolutely got to capitalize on other people advertising for us through use of the selfie. So as compared to a terrific Facebook experience, take a look at the photo album at a speedway near my home. Does this sell the concept to anyone? Let's say 5 people checked into this speedway for the first time on a Saturday night. Now, hundreds and hundreds of their friends are just one click away from a first impression of your business. And I like to say race cars are exciting, and instead, something that no one who isn't a die-hard lover of the sport can even understand are filling the photo albums on the social media site here. How much sales power do these images have? Once again, website pages, Facebook, and all social media should be treated just like TV commercials. If the images and language don't apply to the masses, they are wasting the resources of time and money that you've invested in your digital channels. Now let's talk print advertising for just a bit. Race cars are just as exciting in print as they are online and television commercials. Always look at your flyers, your newspaper ads, and your billboards through the eyes of a thick-sliced general consumer. Does this piece of literature sell anyone on attending the race? Seems like it's trying to sell racers on the idea of competing. Here again, so few people need this information that I can only hope a second flyer was developed for this event. I hope this was the flyer handed out in the pits and that there was a completely different version. Nobody needs to know what those races were paying to win in order to decide to bring their family for entertainment. Let's go back to the flyer we talked about at the beginning. How could we change this? We know that 2,800 people received this flyer, 2,800 of them. Wouldn't a definition of an enduro and photos have gone much farther? Take a look at the entry fee. Take a look at the pit admission. All these things have nothing to do with the general population, particularly the practice times. Let's try to use all of our endeavors to reach out to those hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that have never been to a race before. This flyer would mean nothing to people in the thick slice. Consumers would have no idea what a complete draw, redraw, and draw cutoff means. They probably wouldn't have any idea what a hobby stock is. They probably wouldn't know what a sport mod is. This flyer hopefully was not translated into a newspaper ad because this flyer needed to contain images like this. This flyer needed to tell you the start time, the website for more details, the admission cost, and show you exactly what modifieds are going to do to entertain and please you for giving a weekend night to the sport of short track racing for the first time. Now, since we're talking about print, can we all agree that this is what a brochure rack looks like? I snapped this photo off the internet. I think we can agree that this is pretty much what brochures and rack cards are always displayed in hotels, restaurants, even turnpike plazas. So here's a little tip for you that might seem like it's backwards, but if you're going to make the most of your printed materials here, try this. For my fictional Keystone Speedway, I didn't put the logo at the top. Instead, I put a picture of exciting race cars right at the top. This way, no matter how much of the brochure is being covered up by the brochure in front of it, people aren't going to be seeing just a logo. They're going to be seeing exactly what they get if they try out the product of short track racing. So if you know that a brochure rack is in the future for your printed piece, go against convention. Think outside that box. Put the photo at the top and put the logo down below. A 9, 10, 11, or 12-year-old boy, yeah, I was one of them, is going to grab that for the race car photo quicker than he's going to grab it for the logo of your business. Keep in mind, in a brochure rack, you are competing with all of the other brochures. People only have so much pocket space. People aren't going to walk out with 2-inch stack of literature in their hands. They're going to grab the 2 or 3 that speak to them the most. Put that photo at the top. That's going to get your brochure moving out of the brochure rack. Now we're going to talk for just a moment about a form of marketing called the elevator speech. This is something that on your own time you might want to research online. Elevator speech, by definition, is a carefully written script memorized and recited at business networking events, chamber gatherings, or in any professional setting as part of your personal introduction. Sometimes in short meetings with strangers, or, for example, on an elevator ride, someone will ask you what you do for a living, and you need to have 2 elevator speeches created. One that's about 30 seconds in length, and one that's 90 seconds to 2 minutes. If you memorize this speech, you'll never find yourself at a lack of words or speechless at any type of Chamber of Commerce networking event or when someone asks you what you do for a living. The important part about the elevator speech in racing, just like all of our other advertising and marketing endeavors, is to use only common consumer language that introduces the idea of auto racing in the most general terms in a conversation with the thick slice consumers. Don't get specific about divisions and sanctions. Here's an example for my Keystone Speedway. The Keystone Speedway provides outdoor, family-friendly, high-speed sports entertainment every Saturday night from March through September with free parking, great festival-type food, and opportunities to entertain clients, employees, and groups with our suite rentals and catering options for birthday parties, reunions, bachelor parties, or top-notch corporate events. We help to add some horsepower to your weekend with a night at the races. There's a script that I came up with in about 20 minutes for my fictional speedway, and that as a 90-second to 2-minute speech would be ideal for standing up at a chamber event as we go around the room introducing ourselves. The reason I bring this up as a marketing and advertising endeavor in this situation is just like I've seen so many promoters ruin their advertising and digital presence with terminology that only we in the thin slice can understand, I was in the presence of a promoter at a chamber tour. There was a tour bus of business professionals making their way through the community, stopping at all the prominent businesses. And of course, this promoter was expecting our tour bus, and I happened to be a member of that chamber, and everyone knows that I work in racing for a living, so on the bus, everybody was teasing me, hey, are you going to tell us more about this place than the employees will? And that was kind of a funny joke as we pulled up to get out of the tour bus. So we all gathered in the luxury box at the tower, and the promoter came out and looked at an entire bus full, I think there were 40-some people there, who had never been to the Speedway before, don't understand the product of short track racing, and he started by saying, we are the only Speedway offering 410 sprint car racing on Friday nights. And I looked around the room, and the moment he said 410 sprint car, everybody in the room was lost. First of all, it doesn't sound, if you're not in the sport of racing, how do you even spell that? A Fortin? F-O-R-T? And what's a Fortin car? Don't burden yourself or the people who are listening to your elevator speech with our inside racing jargon. Division names are part of that. Make yourself an elevator speech or two of them, one that is a quick 30-second what you do for a living, and one, as my example, that's a minute and a half or 2 minutes in greater detail for chamber networking events. The same problems that exist in racing advertising and marketing can even exist in the speech that we use in meeting people for the first time. So make sure that your elevator speech or two are created, rehearsed, and memorized. You'll never be speechless. You'll never be without the proper words. And best of all, you can craft it and create it with this same thought process that you need it to be friendly to the masses. You need it to be understood by all those consumers in the giant thick slice of that pie chart that have never come to a race. So in summary, all advertising must use only common consumer language. Ads are to sell, not to communicate to those that are already closest to us. Photos and images can and should sell your product in print, online, billboards, just the same as they do in a television commercial. Thin slice die-hard fans will spend time at your digital outlets looking for what they want. Hide what they want because it directly conflicts with the sales messages and images that we need to get to the thick slice general consumers. Always ask yourself, who needs the information that I'm advertising? Aim for the thick slice as your target in all advertising. Once again, your first impression is no longer the sign at your driveway. It's a flyer, a web page, an advertisement, or a Facebook post. Which first impression of these two images do you want to make in the 10 to 45 seconds that all these consumers will spend getting the first impression of your business? Know your audience. Reach these thick slice individuals. There's hundreds of thousands of them out there that we need to get to keep our sport thriving. Get rid of the drone photo of your property. Add the photo of race cars because race cars are exciting. Now, as we're winding down the presentation, I mentioned at the start that I had a very impressive question from a woman after the first time this presentation was delivered. And she approached me after the session and she said, Mike, I agree with almost everything that you said. I think these are great concepts. I'm going to rethink most of my advertising now, but I do have one question for you. She said, if I'm not going to advertise my divisions, how do I tell people what's out there if I don't use the division names? How can I tell them what they're coming to see? Now, the short answer to that question, which I've implemented at speedways that I work with, as I mentioned briefly early on, I say 4 division racing, 4 different types of cars compete every Saturday. You would be surprised how many people in that thick slice believe that when they buy a ticket to your racetrack, 20 cars are parked on the front straight, they take their seat, and those 20 cars race 200 or 300 laps around the track. By explaining that there's different smaller races in the form of 5 divisions or 4 different types of cars, we're actually playing to that ever-shrinking American attention span by showing people that different things are going to come out on the racetrack. But after this question was posed to me, in the second RPM session that year, I decided to add a question and a story that helps to prove the point about why divisions shouldn't be used in marketing to the thick slice. I was on a road trip to announce a super modified race in the Midwest, and I had to drive about 3 or 4 hours out to the racetrack, and I had the flyer sitting on the passenger seat, and I saw a sign for an ice cream stand coming up. And I said, I don't actually know what time this race starts. So I grabbed the flyer to see if I had time to stop for ice cream. And what do you know? I was running ahead of schedule. I pulled in to get some ice cream. So as I look at the flyer, it told me the hot laps time. Again, that's terminology that probably people in the thick slice wouldn't know. Told me the race starting time. That was great. And then it said, plus modifieds and pony stocks. And the entire time I ate my ice cream, I was trying to bet with myself what a pony stock would be. And I'm thinking, boy, is that a 4-cylinder street car? Maybe? No. What if that's a fabricated body car, like a Camaro body or a Mustang fiberglass body over a stock framed car? No, I don't think that's what it is. Maybe a pony stock is just an outright steel-bodied street stock. The entire time I ate my ice cream, I tried to bet on what a pony stock might be. So in the room at the RPM Promoters Workshop, I asked the greatest minds in racing, a couple hundred of them. I said, raise your hand if you can tell me definitively what a pony stock is. And not one single hand was raised among the smartest people in motorsports. Now, I started working in this sport when I was 17 years old, and I've been to thousands of races, over 100 a year. So here's the way we need to think about our division names. If I don't know what a pony stock is, if 200 of the greatest minds in racing don't know what a pony stock is, what hope is there that any thick-sliced general consumer will be able to understand what a pony stock is if it's mentioned in a radio script, if it's mentioned in the TV commercial, if it's printed in the newspaper ad, or if it's on the flyer? If those of us who have lived our entire lives in the sport can't identify for sure a pony stock, a thunder car, then what hope do we have of getting the right mental picture in the minds of all those people that we need to try this product for the first time? If they're confused by the advertising message, they're not going to bother to show up for the product. In closing, I want to share with you a conversation that I've had with promoters for many, many years. And when I say I've had this conversation, I don't mean I've had this conversation a dozen times. I don't mean I've had it 25 or 30 times. I've had this exact conversation at least 60 or 70 times. And I want to leave you with this thought. I'm going to do a strange voice to be the part of the promoter in this conversation so that you can tell that I'm playing both roles in this conversation. And the conversation always goes something like this. Well, Mike, I'm going to tell you the biggest hurt to racing marketing was the enclosed trailer. Man, I'm telling you, as soon as we started hiding the race cars in the boxes going down the street, we lost the best marketing power we had. Back in the old days, every stoplight in town had a race car and an open trailer, and people would say, man, look how cool that thing is. And people would ask, hey, what's going on? Where's the racetrack? People would even get in their cars and follow the race car to the racetrack. That's how good the marketing was, and we had open trailers. Everybody could see all the race cars, and that was the best marketing we ever had. And my response to that is, well, Mr. Promoter, not only do I agree with you, but I'm the guy who screams race cars are exciting. So I'm 100% with you on this topic. But before we continue this conversation, I'm going to pull out my device and I'm going to go to the homepage of your website. Well, Mr. Promoter, look at my device here. The same way that the enclosed trailers are hiding race cars from everybody downtown on Saturday afternoon, your website is hiding race cars from the hundreds of thousands of potential visitors to your homepage who are cruising the web. If you believe that open trailers were the best marketing that we had, don't go blaming Renegade, don't go blaming Featherlight and CarMate for taking away the great marketing when you yourselves are hiding these exciting machines on your Facebook page. You're hiding them on your website. Instead, you're showing victory lane photos. Instead, you're showing snapshots of the point standings. Don't hide the race cars on your advertising channels the same way the enclosed haulers are hiding them from all the downtown traffic. It's the same principle. The only difference is downtown up the road, 7,000 or 8,000 people may see a race car, and online, 7 or 8 million may see the race car. Remember, race cars are exciting. So here's your to-do list. Carefully review all TV and radio scripts, all flyers and billboard art for any language that would not be understood by the general consumers in the thick slice of the pie chart. Examine the wording on your schedule and all the coming events on your webpage to remove all racing terms, all acronyms and sanctions and things that only those of us in the thin slice would understand. Devote a couple hours of your time to finding the most exciting photos of the racing action that have ever been taken, over the last 5 years even. It doesn't matter if they're old. The people in the thick slice aren't going to be aware of that. If you have late models 3 wide with fire out the exhaust, if you have sprint cars running over each other's tires, it doesn't matter if that's 3 or 4 years old. Use those as the images that sell our product. Then create a folder somewhere of these photos so that you can occasionally rotate them in for digital channels, but make sure it's always the images that sell our product. Whether it's your website or your social media, whether it's print advertising or billboards, all artwork needs to showcase these exciting machines. And finally, the questions to ask yourself with each marketing expense. Every time $1 or every time 10 minutes of your time is spent marketing, ask yourself these questions. To whom is this information important? If the answer is drivers and diehard fans, it's in the wrong place. Will these images and this message sell the product to consumers? If it's informing them, it's in the wrong place. Does my online presence have the same impact on consumers as a 30-second television commercial would? You don't want victory lane footage in your TV commercial. Why do you want victory lane photos in that first 10 to 45 seconds for a new consumer? And finally, am I selling the thrill of a racing event to consumers who don't know racing? Ask yourself those questions before any marketing endeavor. Once again, my name is Mike Lysakowski of Motorsport Aspects, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about these principles. Find me on Facebook or send me an email to motorsportaspects@yahoo.com. And pay attention, because within the coming weeks, The Thick Slice Part 2, the sequel, which was delivered 2 years after this presentation to the RPM Promoters Workshop, will also be uploaded to YouTube. Thanks for your time, and have yourself a great racing season.